set.
Okay, we're set.
We can switch to, we can do one at a time, I think.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. As I mentioned, this is our first time doing a live stream, and it's actually really complicated. We had to do a lot of research, and apparently we still didn't figure it out. So I've got my tofu here, and now I'm just going to add a few flavoring agents. This is just a neutral flavored oil. I've got grapeseed oil, anything like vegetable oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, even like regular olive oil would be fine. You just don't want it to be too distinct in flavor. And I'm just gonna do about a tablespoon. I'm also gonna do a tablespoon of tamari. This is gluten-free soy sauce. Regular soy sauce also works. I sometimes use tamari when I wanna keep the recipe gluten-free, because otherwise, just like so people who have gluten allergies or gluten sensitivities know what to use, but soy sauce totally works as well. And I'm also going to use 2 teaspoons of toasted sesame oil. This has a really lovely nutty flavor that I love. I use it in a lot of my recipes. It is pretty strong, so you don't need too much. There is a difference between toasted sesame oil and regular sesame oil. This has a really nutty flavor, and it's generally used for finishing or really light cooking. You're not supposed to cook it a ton, but I've tried it in this recipe and it works, so I'm gonna kind of break the rules. And just a pinch of salt, because we're already using the tamari. And if you are using tofu that's not been frozen, you'll notice that you'll need a little bit more seasoning, a little bit more salt. As I mentioned earlier, when you freeze tofu, it changes the structure and the texture, and it actually helps you absorb the flavors better. I tested this out actually side by side with 2 blocks of tofu, one that was frozen and thawed and one that was just out of the fridge. And the one that was frozen and thawed absorbed the flavors a lot better. It had more flavor and it was a lot crispier. So just doing a little food science. I'm also going to add a couple more things that I need to go get. I'm also going to add cornstarch. You can use arrowroot powder as well. A tablespoon of that. Substitutes for tamari, I assume soy-free substitutes. I think coconut aminos is what people often use as a soy-free substitute for soy sauce. It is a little bit sweeter. I don't think it would make a huge difference in this particular recipe, but if you're making a sauce that has like 1/4 of a cup of soy sauce or 1/4 of a cup of tamari, I don't know how great it is in that volume, but for this recipe, since it's only a tablespoon, I think it should be fine. I'm also going to add a tablespoon of black sesame seeds. If you don't have black, you can use white sesame seeds. I love the color of the black ones though. And we're also going to use some panko breadcrumbs. So I guess I didn't need to use the gluten-free soy sauce because there is gluten in here. They do make gluten-free varieties of panko. Panko is Japanese breadcrumbs. I really love them. I like them a lot better than your standard breadcrumbs because they are very flaky and light, and I think they add a lot more crispiness than regular breadcrumbs. And I'm adding a tablespoon and a half. And I'm just going to get in there with my hands, mix it all together. All right, I'm gonna set this aside and then quickly wash my hands, and then I'll do the mushrooms. All right, let's talk mushrooms. If you watch my videos, you know I love mushrooms. Today, I'm using both oyster mushrooms, which is what the recipe calls for, and shiitake mushrooms because I couldn't get enough of the oysters. For those of you who don't know oyster mushrooms, this is sort of what they look like. They're fabulous. They've got a really nice and velvety texture. They're pretty, they're very beautiful, and I love them. If you can't find them, you can use shiitake mushrooms, which again, I'm using half and half today. In terms of where to buy your mushrooms, a little burp. You can get different mushroom varieties often at a farmer's market. If you have one in your area, you'll often find more varieties there than at your standard grocery store. And for if you don't have a farmer's market, if you have an Asian grocery store in your area, you'll find tons of mushroom varieties there. For anyone who lives near an H Mart, you'll find probably the biggest selection of mushrooms there. Or if you live near kind of a higher end grocery store like a Whole Foods or a Sprouts, you can usually find different types of mushroom varieties there. So for the oyster mushrooms, it's really simple. Just gonna cut off the very bottom, like tough white stem, and then you kind of just pull them apart with your fingers. So for big ones, I'm gonna just go like that. If there's a small one, I'll just leave it whole, and it's very satisfying to do this. I think I can answer some questions right now while I shred some mushrooms. I'm just going to look at the chat box for a sec. To freeze the tofu, do I need to press it? No. So you freeze the tofu just plain in the packaging before you even open it. Then once you thaw it, you'll drain off any water in the packaging. Some people just start using the tofu after it's been thawed without pressing it. I find it still has some water in there, so I like to press it maybe for just 10 minutes. Not like a full press as I would if I were doing refrigerated tofu, but you can just freeze the tofu whole without doing anything in the package. Canned mushrooms, no, they won't work because they're pretty watery. So you're not going to get the crispy texture that you will with fresh mushrooms. So yeah, sorry. And then what I'm doing with all the mushroom scraps, I'm just putting them back in the package because I have a little mushroom bag in my freezer where anytime I cook with mushrooms, any scraps or stems or parts that are kind of bruised or damaged, I just put them in my mushroom bag, which is not what it sounds like. I put them in my mushroom bag, and then once the bag is full enough, I will make homemade mushroom broth, which is really savory and rich and a great source of umami. If you have my cookbook, which is called the Vegan Instant Pot Cookbook, you can read about it on my blog. I have a mushroom broth in the first chapter. It's actually the first recipe, and it's just so savory and delicious. I'm just going to look at one of the questions that people asked in advance. What is the process behind a new recipe, and where do you get your inspiration from? I was asked this several different formats, so I'll just kind of talk about it all. It really depends. I get a lot of inspiration from going to the farmer's market. So if I see what's in season and I'm like, oh, asparagus is in season. I really love asparagus with lemon and, you know, parsley or tarragon. Like, what can I do with that? I also get a lot of inspiration from having eaten out at restaurants. Obviously, it's a bit of a different time for eating out at restaurants, but when I lived in New York, I would go to all kinds of cool restaurants and get a lot of inspiration. So like I might have a taco dish and I like get inspiration from the flavors or the way they used jackfruit or the way they used cauliflower. I also think a lot about like comfort foods that maybe I loved before going vegan or that I know just everyone kind of generally loves, and thinking about how I can veganize it. I also get a lot of inspiration from other cultures, including my own. My parents are from India and both of them are great cooks. I'm always thinking about like what are some Indian recipes that are naturally vegan or that I can veganize. In my life before the pandemic, we did a bit of traveling, so sometimes I think about foods I've eaten when I've been traveling and like how I can recreate those from like a home kitchen perspective and maybe with ingredients that you would be able to more easily find. So it really depends on in terms of the inspiration. And then in terms of like coming up with the recipe, real quick, I have the shiitake mushrooms and I'm just gonna slice these. In terms of coming up with the recipe, it depends on what kind of recipe it is. If it's something like fairly basic, like, I don't know, like a potato salad or a pasta, I kind of just like put together a rough draft of what I think would be tasty based on my, knowledge of what flavors work together. If it's a more complicated recipe, I definitely do a lot of research. So you guys probably familiar with this a little bit. For instance, when I made my brownies that I posted a video about a month or two ago, I did hours and hours of research, like what makes for a good brownie, how do you achieve a certain texture and a certain taste and all these things. So I do a lot of research and then I kind of write what I think would be a good recipe, test it and then tweak it and then test it again and then tweak it and test it again. If it's a recipe from a culture that is not mine, like, I don't know, Mexican or Chinese, I also do a ton of research so that I can try to be thoughtful in my interpretation of it. Most of these recipes aren't naturally vegan, so it's not like I can really make an authentic version of it, whatever that means, but I still like to do a lot of research on the common ingredients used and how I can veganize it and like the cultural significance of the dish. So yeah, there's a lot of research involved. Another question I wrote down, is the new cookbook an Instant Pot one like your current one or a regular cookbook, and when is it coming out? It is a regular cookbook. It's not an Instant Pot cookbook. I'm really excited about it. One of the reasons I'm not able to upload YouTube videos as often as I would like is that I'm working on it right now and it's just very time consuming. And I really love it, but it does take up a lot of time. And tentatively it will be out fall of 2022. Takes a long time to write a cookbook in the US. What else? Fresh, flavorful food on a budget, tips for that. There was like a longer question, but I just have it written shorthand. I actually have a video coming out on this topic in a couple weeks, so I'm not gonna give too much away, but really, I feel like for a vegan diet, sticking to whole foods for the most part, you're gonna save so much money. Obviously, like, it's fun to try out vegan cheeses and vegan ice creams and things like that, but those can definitely add up cost-wise. So the biggest and kind of most basic tip is to stick to the whole foods like dried legumes, beans, whole grains, pasta, fruits and vegetables. If you buy fruits and vegetables in season, they're probably going to be more affordable. Yeah, whenever I like stick to those kind of basics, I always save a lot more money. So, and it's not that your diet has to be basic. You can do a lot of creative things with those ingredients if you're kind of comfortable in the kitchen. All right, just gonna take a quick look at the chat box. Oh my, there's so many things. All right, Adithi says, how did you decide to start doing YouTube and what did you do before YouTube? So I guess I could start the whole career talk now. I used to be a lawyer, which is very different than what I do now. And I was really unhappy, long story short. And I started just doing like food photos on Instagram just as a hobby while I was still working as a lawyer. It kind of took off. I was like, maybe I can create a job out of this. So I started applying to like food related startups and food publications in New York City. I found a job doing like social media and recipe testing at a food startup in New York called Hungry Root. while I was building Rainbow Plant Life on the side. And after about a year and a half of doing Instagram, I decided to start YouTube, but I didn't really start it in serious. And I had like very little time to work on videos, and I wasn't like thinking about it too much. It was just kind of a side project. And then in the summer of 2019, I quit my job full-time to do Rainbow Plant Life full-time. And then last year, kind of when the pandemic started, I think we started taking YouTube a lot more seriously because Max, my partner, was working from home, so we had time to like work together instead of like 2 hours on a Saturday. So that's kind of how I started YouTube, and I have been working on Rainbow Plant Life full-time now for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years this summer, and I really love it. Rebecca says, which of your recipes would you recommend for someone that doesn't like mushrooms? I mean, so many. Most of my recipes don't use mushrooms. So it really depends on that person's kind of preferences, like if they like a certain cuisine or if they like a certain type of food. A lot of my recipes that are really popular are the comfort foods, so like a lot of creamy pastas, a lot of Indian recipes. So I think it just depends on what cuisine they like, but I have plenty of recipes without mushrooms. Simply Hodge says, is your partner vegan too? If not, does it make it difficult for either of you? He's not. It's not really difficult because I do 99 to 100% of the cooking in the house. So mostly everything eaten at home is vegan for him. If we go out to a restaurant or order takeout, he might get something that's not vegan. It doesn't really bother me because I love him and he's a good person. But also like he eats so much more vegan food than he used to. So like in my book, that's a huge win because the more people eating more plant-based food, the better. I'm gonna answer a couple more questions in a minute, but let me just show you how I'm gonna do the mushrooms so we can get those in the oven. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of the grapeseed oil to the mushrooms. But my spoon is dirty. And some salt and pepper. I'm just going to keep the mushrooms pretty simple. And the sauce we're making is really flavorful, so I feel like the mushrooms don't need much at this point. And if they feel a little dry, that's okay because they're pretty absorbent. But if they feel really dry, then you can add a little bit more oil as needed. And mine feel a little more dry than I thought, so just a drizzle more. Okay. Couple more questions. Herb Jerry, if you could only survive on one type of bean, what would it be? Ooh, I like this question. The chickpea. I don't know if the chickpea is considered a bean, but that's my answer. It's so versatile. It's so versatile, I actually made a whole video on it, like all the things you can do with a chickpea. It's used in some of my favorite recipes. I love that you can like turn it into hummus, but you could also turn it into like a healthy dessert, and you can also make a curry out of it. You can also add it to pasta. You can also make a faux tuna salad out of it. It's like super versatile, and I feel like I am a chickpea in human form. Jimin's Jams says, how often do you test your recipes before you make a video about them? Good question. It varies. Again, based on the complexity of the recipe. So for instance, the brownies, I think I tested them 8 times because I like really wanted to get them perfect. Baking is also super precise, so I wanted to make sure there's no room for error. The breakfast burritos I posted the other day, probably tested them like 3 or 4 times because I felt like I knew all the components themselves were really tasty, so I just needed to like tweak a few things here and there. For like a complex Indian recipe, I might test it like 5 or 6 times. Occasionally something is just like amazing the first time I make it, so maybe just like 1 or 2 times. But yeah, it varies. I want to make sure that I'm giving you a recipe that is going to work and that will leave you and your family very satisfied and happy. So I try really hard to get it right before I share it. Tim Hansen says, is being vegan expensive? It can be, but it certainly doesn't have to be. Again, I referenced this a few minutes ago. I'm going to have a video coming out in a few weeks that will show you that it definitely doesn't have to be. If you, again, stick to mostly whole foods and not specialty products, it's definitely very affordable. When I first went vegan, I was saving a ton of money on food because I was no longer buying organic free-range eggs and organic grass-fed meat and all these things that add up. And when I was sticking just to those things, I was saving a ton of money. Now, as a food blogger and a recipe developer, I'm constantly buying food to test new recipes, so it's a little hard to compare that version. But if you do stick to mostly plant-based foods and you buy a lot of produce in season, it's definitely something you can do on a budget. Okay. Mushrooms, oh crap. I tossed the mushrooms, only half of the mushrooms in the oil. Uh-oh. Okay, 1 sec. So for the mushrooms and the tofu, I'm gonna just use some parchment paper on a rimmed baking sheet. This is obviously a very new one, just to minimize sticking. And for anyone who has newly joined us, just want to recap what I'm making. I'm making my crispy sesame tofu and mushroom lettuce wraps. I've already prepared the tofu and I'm about to finish the mushrooms, and then I'm going to bake them in the oven. I've got the oven preheating at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. I do not know what that is in Celsius off of the top of my head, but I'm sure someone in the chat box will let you guys know if you're curious. So I forgot to oil the rest of the mushrooms, so I'm going to add the ones that I did. And just do that with this again too. And I'm just going to eyeball it. And get some salt and pepper. And I mentioned this in my videos, but I use kosher salt for most of my cooking. I think it's great for cooking because it's a lot more inexpensive compared to sea salt. It's also really easy to pinch in comparison to like a table salt. If you see one of my recipes and you think, oh, like that's a lot of salt, keep in mind that the kosher salt I use is about half as salty as regular table salt. So if you're using a different type of salt, just keep that in mind. Becca Caldwell says, do you have a lot of food waste making recipes, or do you generally eat all the tests? I try to eat as much as I can. I would say I never, at this point, especially because I'm working on my cookbook, cook food for the sake of cooking, because I always have leftovers in my fridge, so I'm always eating leftovers. So this morning for breakfast, I had tofu and roasted sweet potatoes with pickled jalapenos and scallions and tahini, because I had a lot of leftovers in my fridge. So I try to eat as much as I can. Max eats a lot of it. Now that I can kind of see people a little bit more safely, I try to give stuff to friends and family. So yesterday I made my brownies and I brought them over to some family members. There occasionally is some waste and I don't love it, but kind of pandemic living was that I couldn't really share it with anyone. I do freeze a lot of the stuff I make, but when you're testing recipes all the time, unfortunately, there is a little bit of food waste. All right, so I'm just putting the mushrooms on a sheet pan. I've lined it with parchment paper just to prevent sticking. It's going to make cleanup a lot easier. And yeah, the recipe calls for 1 pound of mushrooms, but I'm using a little bit less than that. And I think it's actually a good amount because it fits on the sheet pan, and 1 pound of mushrooms might have been a little more crowded. Susan Stumpted, I think, says, you moved to Cali to be near your family. Yeah, primarily. I grew up in California, actually. I'm back. I grew up in California. I moved after college to go to law school to the East Coast, and then I was living in New York for 8 years, and then we had been thinking about moving for a year or so, and then the pandemic started, and that just kind of changes your priorities in life. And yeah, so my parents live here, my sister and her husband live here, and their new baby. So it's really nice being close to family, because I only used to see them like once or twice a year, and now I get to see them once a week, which is great. So this is the tofu I prepped earlier. If you missed it, I have some extra firm tofu that I previously froze and then defrosted. I mixed it with a little bit of oil, sesame oil, soy sauce, cornstarch, panko breadcrumbs, and sesame seeds. And a little bit of salt, just a tiny bit. What is another question I got? Why did you go vegan? I feel like the kind of fundamental question. Primarily for ethical reasons. I have a whole video on this. If you're interested, it's from 2017, so it's a little bit of an old video with not the best filming quality, but I think it's still a good video as to why I went vegan. I had been vegetarian for a couple months, and vegan was like becoming a very popular thing on social media and kind of just in conversation. And I was like, maybe I should go vegan, but I didn't really have a reason to go vegan. I was just like, oh, it seems like it's the cool thing to do. And so it didn't really work, because I was like, well, I love cheese and I love ice cream. And then one day, Max was traveling, and I was like, I'm gonna watch some TV before bed. And I ended up watching a food documentary called Food Inc. about like how our food is grown and like the role of agribusiness and like big corporations. And it's not an explicitly vegan documentary, but the next morning I was like, I want to watch more. So then I came home and I watched probably 3 more documentaries on like how animals are treated in the factory farming industry, how our food is grown, how the workers are treated in the factory farms, how the populations living nearby are impacted by like all the waste runoff and like all these environmental hazards. And there was just a lot of information there that it was hard to ignore. And so then the third night I watched, I think, like 3 more documentaries, and stayed up till like 1 in the morning watching them. And the next day I was like, I have gone vegan. So if anyone really wants to make the switch but is struggling, it's a very effective way to do that. And then as time went on, I just started learning more and more about the environmental impact of animal agriculture and how it's so bad for the planet in the volume that we do. And so is it back? Oh no, off.
I should be back in a second. I hope. Okay, it's back.
Are we back? We're back. Back. Cool. Yay. Okay. I was telling you why I went vegan. Yes. And then someone had asked a question that I was answering, but I forgot what I was saying. Do I have any other hobbies besides cooking? Yes, although I would say I don't have as much time for the hobbies as I used to, just because like running your own business is very time consuming. Not to say I don't enjoy it, I love it. But I also really like spending time outdoors, another great perk of living in California. Hiking, although I haven't done that recently. Dancing, also haven't really done that outside of my house recently. And really just like spending time with friends and family, I feel like is kind of one of the best things to do in life, is just be with the people you love. So I would say that's a hobby, even if it doesn't feel like a hobby. So many nice comments. Thank you guys so much. Donna, you're such a sweetheart. I love your recipes and channel. Thank you. Sibal, all the way from South Africa. I love your channel recipes. That's so nice. Thank you. James asks, ever thought about showing off your kitchen setup, like the tools and the organization? Yes, I have thought about it. I'm not quite at the point where I feel like my kitchen is where I'd like it to be in terms of organization. I feel like I'm still figuring things out. And I recently had my pantry organized, so I feel like that's in a good place. But like some of the pots and pans and things like that, I'm like, I want to organize it better before I like show you guys what it looks like. All right, so I'm gonna put the tofu and the mushrooms in the oven. The oven is at 425 Fahrenheit. It's been preheating for quite a while. And I'm gonna do the tofu and mushrooms for about 15 minutes, flip them or kind of toss the pan for even cooking, and then maybe 10 to 15 more minutes. Oven rack is in the wrong spot. Oh, thanks, Charlie. Charlie did a super chat. Hi, Nisha, just want to say thank you for all that you do. I love your channel. Thanks, Charlie. That's wonderful to hear. If anyone knows what super chat is, it's basically an option for you to be like a super fan, I guess. And you can donate a small amount of money to, I guess, support the channel. No pressure at all. But if you feel compelled, there is the option to use the super chat. Okay, while the tofu, wait, I have to set a timer. Alexa, set a timer for 15 minutes for the tofu.
Tofu timer, 15 minutes, starting now.
It's a real success when she listens to me on the first time. Okay, so in the meantime, I'm going to cook the rice noodles for the lettuce wraps. I'm just gonna have the tofu with some rice noodles and the sauce. Where are the rice noodles? Let me turn on some water. I've got like one pack, I don't know what this is called, a clump of rice noodles. This is like a vermicelli kind, so it's like very thin. Some rice noodle packages will tell you to just soak the noodles in warm water for like 30 minutes. This one says to boil them, so I'm gonna boil them for, I think, 8 minutes. You could use other kinds of noodles. You don't have to use rice noodles. You could use soba noodles or like a wheat noodle, depending on like where you're getting your noodles from. Again, if you have an Asian market in your area, you'll find tons of different noodle options. I'm gonna use these ones today. And Adna says, I love your Instant Pot cookbook. It's so good. I got one for my daughter who's a vegan. Thank you. That's so sweet. I love your relationship with Alexa, the other woman. Well, that makes one of us, because I do not enjoy my relationship with her. It is at least daily, that I express extreme frustration with the other woman. So I'm going to set the noodles aside until the water is boiling. And make some space over here. I'm going to answer a couple more questions. Let's see. Whoops. Do you watch, Simply Hot says, do you watch your calories or pay attention to how much you eat? No. And the reason I say no so forcefully is that when I was younger, I had disordered eating, and I think going vegan actually helped me to develop a much better, healthier relationship with food. And so I really just focus on what I'm in the mood for, what my body wants. Sometimes it's very wholesome food, sometimes it's a little bit more of a sweet treat or a little bit of a creamy comfort food or processed food or junk food. I try to eat what feels right to me, and I try to eat until I'm full. Occasionally, like most normal humans, I do overeat occasionally, but I feel like going vegan really taught me how to be just more mindful and more appreciative of the food instead of counting calories or thinking about like what foods are bad and like, should I avoid carbs or should I avoid gluten or should I avoid soy, like all these things. So that's why I don't include nutritional information in my recipes, and that's why I try not to like talk about that kind of stuff in my work, because I feel like I have a much better relationship with food, and I know that a lot of other people do too when they don't think about those things in a really restrictive way, if that makes sense. Thank you so much, Susan. I appreciate it. Super chat, really appreciate it. Your recipes make it so easy to stick to my vegan diet. That's so nice to hear. Lori Pop says, I made your caramelized onion pasta not long ago. It was so good. It might become one of my staple pasta dishes. That's great to hear. If you're not familiar, I have a caramelized onion pasta. It has just 9 ingredients. I developed it, I think, right before the pandemic started, but then it became like one of those recipes that was like perfect for the pandemic. So if you want to find that, just search caramelized onion pasta on my blog. Oded says, what are your most favorite spices? I don't know if I have like a list of favorite spices. It kind of depends on what I'm making, but some things that I use a lot are cumin and coriander and turmeric, often in Indian recipes, but also in some sort of like Middle Eastern recipes, as well as some Latin recipes, coriander and cumin. I love cardamom, especially fresh cardamom pods, which you can buy at an Indian grocery store. It has this like sweet, warm flavor that's really unique. I also really love Aleppo pepper, which is a red chili pepper that's quite mild. It's originally from Aleppo in Syria, though it's hard to grow there because of the war, so sometimes it's grown outside of Aleppo now, but it's kind of fruity. It's really lovely. I also love sumac, which I've shared in a few of my recipes. It's tart and lemony. It's beautifully red as well. I mean, there are so many more, but I'll just leave it at there for now. Thank you, Andre, for your super chat. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Andre. Andres, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Aiden, thank you, I appreciate it. This recipe is a real hit with my non-vegan family. Thank you so much for doing what you do. Well, thank you. Are you going to develop a prepackaged food service? Susan asks. Not at the time. I had sent out that survey a few months ago, and we were like exploring an option, which I still think is an exciting option, but just right now my cookbook is my focus, so maybe in the future I would love to work on a product, but not at this time. John Doe, very funny, asks, where can we get your cookbook? So if you go to my website, rainbowplantlife.com/cookbook, you'll find different options to purchase it online. Obviously, Amazon is the easiest place, but I know some people don't want to shop from Amazon. There's also a couple links to indie booksellers from there. You can also call your local bookseller to see if they can stock it. I know Barnes & Noble's often has it as well. If you live internationally, the Book Depository is a great place to get it because I think shipping is free on that website, thebookdepository.com. And then certain like bigger bookstores will have it, like Powell's Books had it at least at some point in some locations. I don't know if all the locations have it, but usually for larger bookstores and smaller bookstores, like if you call and ask and say like, can you stock it, they'll at least try to do it. So you can also try that. Wes Andrade says, what would be your go-to recipe to try to convert someone? I assume to veganism. So I have a video on my channel called like what I'd make for a vegan skeptic, and the recipe I chose was my red lentil curry. It's probably my most popular recipe. It's very easy, but really like, I don't know, feels gourmet. It's very comforting. A lot of people who are not vegan love it. If I were trying to convert someone who feels like they need meat at every meal, I would probably do something like my Crunchwrap Supreme, because that has a very delicious, meaty meat alternative. It also has like an amazing vegan queso sauce and a crispy tortilla and all these things. So like if I were trying to get someone who thinks that way, then I would try the Crunchwrap Supreme. For anyone who just joined, I'm making crispy sesame, tofu, and mushroom lettuce wraps. You can find the printable recipe on my blog. It's linked in the description box of this live stream. The tofu and the mushrooms are currently in the oven. I'm gonna get started on making the sauce. It's a spicy almond sesame sauce. So let me get a bowl and then we'll get started. So for this recipe, I'm going to be using almond butter. It's the almond sauce. This is a creamy variety. A crunchy variety isn't necessarily the worst thing. It'll just make the sauce a little bit less smooth and a little crunchy. Okay, so I'm going to use 4 tablespoons of almond butter. I'm not going to be like super precise with the measurements right now because it's just for us at home. I've already made this recipe, but when I do test recipes for the blog or for YouTube, I'm very precise with the measurements because again, like I want to make sure the recipe works for other people who aren't, cooking in my kitchen. And if you have leftovers of the sauce, it's so good. You could just pair it with some rice noodles or udon noodles or soba noodles with some like edamame and veggie for like a quick dinner. You could thin it out. Oh, the water's boiling. I was like, what's that sound? The water for the noodles is boiling. And I have almond butter all over my fingers. One sec. You could also thin out this dressing with a little bit of water and use it as a salad dressing, and then use it that way. I really like it with something crispy like romaine or little gem lettuce. It's really nice with that. Or if you have spring rolls or summer rolls, you could use it as a dipping sauce. Was that 4 tablespoons? I'm gonna assume it was 4 tablespoons. I don't remember. And I'm just gonna microwave this for like 20 to 30 seconds just to like make it a little bit more pliable and able to incorporate into the other sauce ingredients. Alexa, set a noodle timer for 8 minutes. Zorp, thank you so much. Oh,
8 minutes.
sorry.
Starting now.
Zorp, thank you so much for your super chat. That's so sweet. Said, I went vegan in April 2020. I'm so happy to have found your channel and cookbook. Thank you so much for your delicious recipes. I love the tofu cauliflower tikka masala in your cookbook. That's my favorite recipe in the cookbook, so I'm so happy you love it. Cool. Okay. So now for the sauce, I'm going to add some sriracha. Recipe says a tablespoon or half a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half. The range is for people, you know, everyone has different spice tolerances. So if you, I don't want to say if you have baby mouth, because you have baby mouth, I don't know if you can even have that much sriracha, but if you're on the lower end of the spice spectrum, you can do a half tablespoon. We like things spicy, so I'm going to use a tablespoon and a half if I can find another tablespoon measure. My Alexa has now set a timer for noodles. Sorry, Zabs. I figured that would happen, but I don't have my phone on me to set a timer. Okay, back to the sauce. We're also going to add a half tablespoon of this. This is Chinese black vinegar. I've tried to pronounce this. It's chinkang. I know I'm not saying it right. So please try to learn it from someone who's Chinese and not me. But Chinese black vinegar is a very kind of intense type of vinegar. It's a little smoky, it's a little tangy. It's certainly more flavorful than a lot of vinegars commonly used in Western cuisine. If you don't have it, it's totally fine. You can use rice vinegar, though I'd probably use a little bit more because this has a lot more flavor packed into it. And again, you can find this at a Chinese or kind of Pan-Asian grocery store. I got this at H Mart. I know I mentioned H Mart a lot, but it's a really great place for all kinds of Asian ingredients. It's very affordable, lots of vegan options there. What else are we adding? I'm gonna add a tablespoon of agave nectar. I go through a lot of these. You could use maple syrup. I prefer agave a little bit for recipes where I don't want the flavor of the sweetener to come through. So maple syrup has a more of a robust flavor, and this is neutral. I'm also going to use a half tablespoon of tamari or soy sauce. Alexa's going off.
The tofu timer is done.
Alexa, stop. Maybe that will stop your noodles timer. All right, I'm going to set this aside for now so I can make some space for the mushrooms and tofu. All right, so is this camera on? No. Okay, so I'm just going to try to show you this from here. As you can see, some of the tofu is already nicely golden brown. They don't need to be like fully flipped like on one side because there's so many sides. You just kind of want to just toss them a little bit. And then I'll put them back in the oven for another 10 minutes. I think if you don't freeze it, it takes a little bit longer to get golden brown, so maybe like 15 minutes. And now for the mushrooms. I'm gonna flip these as best as I can. Whenever I flip things, I try to just do it as quickly. I never get like everything perfect. It would take me too long to flip each mushroom individually. So I'm just gonna do my best. Okay, these are gonna go back in the oven. I think these probably need another 15 minutes, so I'll have to set another timer. If you want to mute me for 10 seconds, I won't blame you. Alexa, set a timer for 15 minutes.
Second time, 15 minutes.
Alexa, set a tofu timer for 10 minutes. Does she hear me? No. Alexa, set a tofu timer for 10 minutes.
Total timer, 10 minutes. Starting now.
Noreen Ireland says, can you please explain why sometimes the whole seeds of spices are used and other times the ground spices are used? So it really varies on the recipe. Whole spices are used a lot in Indian recipes. That's the primary way I use them in Indian recipes. So occasionally, maybe in some like Middle Eastern recipes, I will as well. Just as like a general rule or principle, whole spices have more flavor and they're going to be fresher than ground spices. So as soon as you grind a spice, it starts to lose some of its flavor. So at the grocery store, pre-ground spices, if they've been sitting there for a couple months or even longer, like it's just it's detracting from the freshness of the whole spice. So if you want the freshest, most like robust spice flavor, grinding your own spices at home is the best way to go. If you have a spice grinder, you can do that. I'll show you the one I have. This is a Cuisinart one. You can just like use it like this, or if you have a mortar and pestle, you can do that. For like everyday weeknight recipes, I just stick to pre-ground spices. I do go through a lot of spices, so I feel like I don't have any spices that have been there for like a year or longer, so I still feel like they're pretty fresh. But if I want like to really create an amazing recipe where there's tons of fresh, robust spice flavor, I will try to use ground spices. And there's a couple of different ways to use ground spices. I feel like I could do a whole video on this, but you can toast whole spices in a couple of different ways. You want to toast them to unlock their flavors, their essential oils. That's where all the flavors live. So you can toast them dry in a pan on the stove for a couple minutes until they get really aromatic. You can also toast them in oil, which is blooming spices in oil. It depends on the kind of recipe you're making. So I hope that answered some of your question, but I feel like this could be a whole video. Oh, there's some more super chats. Thank you. Roxana, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I just went vegan. I love your channel. I made your lentil curry. It was out of this world. Oh, that's so lovely to hear. Thank you. And thank you so much. Damn it, Alexa.
The noodle timer is done.
Alexa strikes again. So the noodles are done. Alexa, stop.
The noodle timer is done.
The noodles are done. I'm just going to drain them over this bowl. I'm using a fine mesh sieve because the noodles are so skinny that they would maybe fall through a regular colander. And then I'm going to drain these in cold water. That's usually what you want to do for rice noodles. Sorry, I was in the middle of thanking Anouk. Thank you so much for your super chat. You're my favorite YouTube chef. I've tried dozens of your recipes. Haven't discovered even a single one that I didn't like. Thank you. That's so nice to hear. I truly feel so blessed and honored when people tell me that my recipes have helped them either become a better cook or help feed their family or get them excited about plant-based cooking. That is my ultimate goal, and so I love hearing that. Thank you so much. Alexa's getting a little sassy. She's always sassy. The other woman. Thank you so much for your super chat, Margarita. I love your channel. Your red lentil curry is a real success, even with my carnivore friends and family. Yes, so someone had asked earlier, like, what recipe would you make to convince someone to either try a plant-based diet or to go vegan? Red lentil curry is a very popular one with non-vegans, so definitely check it out. Love your channel. King Saste says, love your channel. What is your favorite way to cook tempeh? It is a very nutritious, high protein, plant-based protein that needs more love. I agree, it needs more love. It is tricky though. I feel like tempeh is hard to do well. It loves a good marinade. Actually, something like this sauce that I'm making could be a good marinade. I haven't tried it, but I really love it with kind of Asian-ish sauces. I find that it gets a little bit dry in the oven, so I try to pan fry it sliced thinly on the stove. If you find tempeh to be too bitter, you can steam it beforehand. That kind of helps remove the tempeh bitterness. Steam it for 10 minutes. Another thing I like to do is to crumble it. So in my cookbook, you'll find a tempeh chili, and that crumbles the tempeh, and so I feel like it doesn't taste bitter, and it also kind of blends into the chili. You can also kind of cook it in the same way that you might like a chorizo, add like a lot of Mexican spices and some lime juice and things like that. I think those are all good ways to cook tempeh, but it is tricky to get right. Melinda Stefan says, what is your favorite vegan dessert you've made? Oh, that is a hard one because I love dessert. Some favorites off the top of my head, my lemon lilac cake. If lilacs are in season right now where you live, I highly recommend trying it. It's got the most unique flavor. I don't know how to describe it except that it's amazing. It's like a buttery pound cake with lemon and lilac. It's so good. My brownies, like obviously, if you haven't tried them, it's like a chocolate explosion in a brownie form. It's chewy, it's fudgy, it's crinkly on top. I love those. I could probably talk about dessert forever, so I'm just going to leave it at those two. Monkey Crow says, have you watched The Game Changers on Netflix? I have. I watched it a couple years ago when it came out. I thought it was really well done. I know several people who stopped eating meat after that. I think it's a very persuasive documentary. A lot of documentaries can not be persuasive to outsiders in the sense that, like, obviously they have a perspective and they want you to change your behavior in some way, but sometimes they feel like they're done too strongly, or the information they present is not presented as compellingly as it should be, or it's presented in a way that's like you can tell they're omitting some information. But I think The Game Changers was an example of a documentary that did it really, really well. So if anyone's interested in it, you can find it on Netflix. It's really about the health benefits of going vegan, especially like from a sports and endurance perspective. And I learned so much from it that I didn't know, because I didn't go vegan for health reasons, but it was really interesting to learn. Carol Burton says, love your cutting board. Can you tell me about it? Sure. It's backwards. So it says Boost Block here. It's a Boost Block. John Boost makes these really well designed wooden cutting boards. They come in a different surface, like colors, varieties, finishes, like oak or maple. I used to have, probably still do in my garage, a dark one. They're very high quality. You do have to take care of them pretty well, but I really love it. And you can find them on the John Boost website or on Amazon, and some cooking store or kitchen stores as well. Els17 says, not cooking related, how did you manage to go from lawyer job to YouTube? I'm really struggling at my job lately. I can't seem to find the nerve to leave it. Oh, good question. So I'll have to rewind for this answer. So I started working as a lawyer in 2012, right out of law school at a big corporate law firm. It was the worst job ever. It's like one of those firms on Wall Street, and it's terrible. Don't ever do it if anyone's thinking about it. And so after 2 years, my partner and I, we quit, and we decided to do a backpacking trip for 6 months around the world. And that was a very fun, eye-opening experience. Traveling, for many people, kind of opens your eyes to new things and gives you all these big life lessons. And for me, it was just what are you doing to live your best life? Like, what are you doing to be happier? Like, because I think being happy has to be a conscious choice, and you have to like put effort into it, and you have to develop practices and routines and systems to make yourself happy. It's not just like it falls into your lap. And traveling really made me realize that like that's something I wanted to focus a lot on. And so when I came back from traveling, I still practiced law in a very different setting. And I knew that after the first few months, I still wasn't happy what I was doing. I wasn't fulfilled. And I knew that like, even though I had this right in the middle of my heartfelt speech.
The timer is done.
Alexis, stop. I'm in the middle of a speech. Alexis, stop. She's just lighting up. Anyway, so I was like, I need to be doing something that makes me happy. And so I definitely had a lot of fear about leaving a prestigious job and a prestigious career. But I knew at the end of the day that like, I only had this one life and I wanted to do something more meaningful with it. And so I was in the position where I had saved a little bit of money. And it just felt like if I don't do it now, when will I do it? So that is my spiel in a nutshell. Let me go check on the tofu. I'm never going to finish the sauce, apparently. All right, tofu looks really nice. Fortunately, our second camera is not working, but I'm just going to hold up a piece for you.
It's working.
Oh, it's working. Yay, it's working.
1 second.
Wait, okay. Does it work? So if you can see the little second side camera, the tofu is really nice and golden. Oh, here's a piece of the tofu. It's nice and golden. Some pieces are a little more golden than other, but that's okay. And it feels very nice and crunchy. So I'm gonna set that aside and try to make the rest of the sauce. Okay, you wanna switch back? Okay. Where did I leave off on the sauce? Okay, we have 4 tablespoons of almond butter, a tablespoon of agave, a tablespoon and a half of sriracha, a half tablespoon of Chinese black vinegar. Okay, I think that's where we left off. Did we add soy sauce? We did. We did add soy sauce. Okay, so next up is sesame oil. I'm using that same toasted sesame oil. A tablespoon of that. And now we need some ginger and garlic. Where is that? Thank you so much, C. Davida, for your super chat. I love your palak paneer. Oh, the sauce, it's incredible. Even tried it with tempeh and it was delicious. Thank you so much, and that's so great to know. Someone earlier asked about ways to use tempeh, and I love that you use tempeh in the palak paneer recipe instead of tofu. Super cool. Garlic and ginger. The recipe calls for 1 inch of ginger, and I think someone actually asked me, like, what is 1 inch of ginger? I never know what that means. It's like this much. But I usually just eyeball it when I'm cooking for myself. And I also really like ginger, so I'm never like worried that I'm gonna have too much ginger. To peel ginger, you can use a spoon. I think that's the easiest way. You could use a sharp knife, you can use a peeler. I actually am not going to peel it because the peel is edible. And using this grater, which I've showed you in a video before, a lot of the peel comes out on the top anyways, and I get mostly flesh on the bottom, but also the peel's edible, so I'm just gonna do that. Vera asks, why use black vinegar? What is the difference with normal vinegar? So I explained it earlier, Chinese black vinegar, it's just like a really bold flavor that I think is great in this recipe. It's used a lot in Chinese cooking. It's a little tangy, it's a little smoky. You can totally use rice vinegar instead. I wouldn't use like white vinegar though. I don't really think that has any flavor, and so I don't use it in cooking. So for the ingredients that are going into this sesame almond sauce, we've got 4 tablespoons of smooth almond butter, tablespoon-ish of sriracha, less or more depending on your spice level. Alexa, stop. We also have a half tablespoon of that Chinese black vinegar, a tablespoon of agave nectar, a half tablespoon of soy sauce or tamari, a tablespoon of toasted sesame oil, and now I'm going to add about this much ginger, maybe a little less, and 3 cloves of garlic. Let's go check on the mushrooms first, though. So possibly could use a little longer time. Some of them are nice and crisp, but I'm gonna put them in. I'm gonna do 5 more minutes. I'm not gonna set another timer though because I'm done with her. Okay, so I'm just gonna grate some of this ginger into the bowl. I've been asked this before about ginger. Sometimes it's really tough and hard to cut. Usually that's just a sign that it's old. If you buy ginger that's fairly fresh, it's a lot easier to slice through, so it's gonna be a lot softer. If you've had some ginger in your fridge for like a couple weeks, it's gonna be a little harder. But with a grater, it's really easy to grate it regardless. It's also easier to grate it if you freeze the ginger in advance, so you can try that. Sabine says, what if I can't eat garlic? You can just omit it, it's fine. There's a lot of other flavor in this recipe. Mind Keys says, how did you get started with Rainbow Plant Life? I've been starting my own blog. Do you have any tips? I mean, yes, so many, I suppose. I got started, as I mentioned at the beginning, with Instagram. This is when Instagram was much different than it is today. And then I kind of just started a new platform after that. Then I went and started a blog, then I started a YouTube channel. I think for new creators, it makes sense to think about what you're the best at because each platform is different, right? Like not everyone's on YouTube because to be on YouTube, for the most part, you have to be comfortable on camera. Like there are some amazing creators who just do B-roll and voiceovers, but for the most part, you kind of have to be on camera. And so if you're deathly camera shy and you don't think you'll ever want to get better at it, YouTube's probably not the place for you. So I think thinking about that, also thinking about like why you want to start a blog. A lot of people just have this idea, and I'm not saying whoever asked this question does, but have this idea that they want to be like Insta famous or become an influencer, but they don't really have like a strong connection to the work or to the reason they're creating their content or their blog or their channel. And I think that eventually shows through. People can kind of tell when you're not passionate about something and when you're just like hopping on a trend. It's also a ton of work. Like being a content creator, you have to create all the time. You have to show up all the time. And again, I'm not complaining. It's just like, if you're doing it for a reason that you're not passionate about, like, I don't think the amount of work is worth it. So I think if you're very new to this space, like thinking about your why and making sure that it's something you're really, really passionate about. And then following other creators, seeing what people are doing, what you're attracted to. Like one of the mistakes I've made when I started YouTube was I never watched YouTube. Like I didn't know what people were doing on YouTube, and I think as a result had no idea how to make a YouTube video when I started. So like becoming an avid consumer of the platform that you want to be part of is super helpful. All right, so I need 3 cloves of garlic, but these are really big ones, so I'm just gonna use 2. And the recipe says to crush them. I'm going to use a garlic press to get it really finely crushed because I don't want any large chunks of garlic in the sauce. If you don't have a garlic press, that's fine. You can just mince it very finely. Violetta says, do you consider yourself an influencer? I hate that word, so no. I think it's a dumb word. I think the reason I don't like that term is because it has like these connotations with it of like, you know, I think you probably know the negative connotations it has with it. Like, I don't think that's like what my work is about. However, I know that I do have the power to influence people's eating choices and what people make at home and whether they go vegan or plant-based or primarily plant-based. I know I have influence on other things too, like, you know, what issues are important in the world to think about. And I share a lot of this on my Instagram stories on a regular basis. And so I do take that very seriously. Like, how can I inspire people? How can I encourage people? How can I share content that's going to get people to live more thoughtful lives and to feed themselves and their families better and to just like kind of be a positive force in the world. So that's something I do think about a lot, and that influences a lot of the content I share, but I don't like the word influencer. Kiki says, why didn't you like the result of making homemade tahini? I've seen many people on YouTube making it. I just got a Vitamix today. I want to try it. I would say part of it is that I have a very good tahini at home. It's from the brand Sum Foods. I think it's an incredible tahini. So I couldn't ever get it to taste that good. The second thing is that tahini commercially made uses like much stronger equipment than we have at home, including a Vitamix. So I could not get it as smooth as store-bought tahini. And then you also have to add oil because you can't get it as smooth. So traditionally tahini is just sesame seeds, no oil. And so I had to add oil, and I also felt like I had to add some salt to balance the bitterness. And at that point I was like, what is the point? So that's why I didn't stick with my own homemade tahini. That said, I know several people who've made it and really like it. So I know it's possible. It just didn't feel like it was worth it to me. Okay, all the garlic. Oh wait, I forgot about the mushrooms. This is why you set a timer. I hope they're not burned. No, they're fine. All right, mushrooms look nice. Ooh, this one's real crispy. Ooh, oh, nice. This is what it looks like. You can see the oyster mushrooms look real nice and crispy. The shiitake are a little more chewy than crispy, so it's a nice kind of interplay between different textures. Oh, that's good. All right, I'm gonna assemble the lettuce wraps now. Let me go get the lettuce. Oh wait, I have to whisk the sauce. I keep forgetting about the sauce. I feel like it's being neglected. In my recipes and my channel, I always encourage you to taste as you go. So with this sauce, for instance, taste it. If you want more spiciness or more tang or more savoriness, then add it afterwards. So for more tang, more vinegar, for more spiciness, more sriracha, for more sweetness, agave, etc. Especially if you're making a recipe for the first time, it's really helpful to taste as you go so that you don't end up with a recipe at the end where you're like, oh, I don't really like this, and it's too late to change anything. Sneha says, do you feel motivated every single day doing what you do? If not, how do you keep going on days when you're not feeling it? I would say I do feel motivated 95% of the time, so pretty high rate, because I love what I do. Thank you to everyone who makes that possible. Some days I just have a day where I'm like, what? Just kind of a crap day. I think that's super common for everyone. Max is super helpful in helping me focus on the big picture. So like if I post a video or a photo and it doesn't perform well, or I'm like testing 6 recipes in a day and like all 6 of them aren't good, like he always reminds me that there's a bigger picture here, and that my value, both as a creator but also as a person, isn't tied to like one of those very small things. And I think in the back of my mind I know that, but it's really helpful when someone else tells you that, because it definitely shifts the perspective. All right, so this lettuce is butter lettuce. I really like butter lettuce. If you can't find butter lettuce, you can use iceberg lettuce. Obviously it doesn't have the same texture, but it's fine. You could use romaine. Really any kind of lettuce that enables you to have like a wrap or a cup. And these are pre-washed, I believe. There's a little bit of dirt though, so let me go wash those. Thank you so much for the super chat, Sweet Escape. Hello host, shout out to everyone, appreciate that. Thank you so much for anyone who has done a super chat. It is very sweet and I appreciate it very much. Just give these a wash. And if I had more time and knew where my salad spinner was, I would spin them in the salad spinner, but I don't. And if like lettuce wraps aren't your thing, if you're like, I need something heartier, you could just turn this into a noodle bowl. Like you could do udon noodles or soba noodles or ramen noodles, and with the sauce, with the tofu and with the mushrooms, and you could add some sort of crunchy veggies. You could add bell peppers or cabbage or edamame for more protein. So if lettuce wraps aren't your thing, but I have to say these lettuce wraps are actually really good. So I would still try them. Where are the rice noodles? Oh, yes, they're behind me. M. Beck says, what are some daily dishes you cook just to feed yourself 3 times a day versus to be creative? So I mentioned this earlier in the video or the live stream. I usually just eat leftovers every day at this point, especially because I'm working on my second cookbook. So I just have so much food all the time in my fridge. So it's really just leftovers. Sometimes it's like simple leftovers where it's like components. So like roasted sweet potatoes with tofu and tahini, or like an everything sauce that I have in my fridge. And sometimes it's fancier things, like I'm testing a tofu tikka masala for my cookbook, and so we had that a few days ago with rice. So it really varies. I don't have a better answer than that, sorry. So for the rice noodles, since they're so long and the lettuce wraps are pretty small, I'm just gonna cut them to make it a little bit more manageable. Put them there for now. Someone asked earlier, how do you deal with having the cutest parents ever? Which I thought was adorable. It's not a real question, except that I'm very lucky to have great parents, and I'm really grateful that I get to see them all the time now. What else? All right, I think that's enough rice noodle for now because I'm just gonna make a couple. So you're gonna grab a lettuce cup, leaf of lettuce. And I actually cut the tofu a little bit bigger than I normally would for the lettuce wraps because these leaves are a bit smaller. So if I were to do this again, I would cut the tofu a little bit smaller. But yeah, it's still tasty. And then I'm gonna add some of the mushrooms. Some rice noodles. Shalene says, hi Nisha, when and where did you learn how to cook, specifically plant-based cooking? So I first started cooking as a teenager. This was when the Food Network was like really all about just shows on how to cook and like not reality TV shows. So I learned a lot about cooking there. I'd watch it every day for hours. I'd go to Barnes and Nobles, I'd read cookbooks, I'd like DVR the Food Network, all the shows. And then plant-based cooking was a lot of experimentation because when I went vegan, there weren't that many vegan cookbooks to really look at for guidance. So it's also so good. It was a lot of experimentation, like how can I replicate the flavors and textures of dairy and meat in a plant-based way? So it was just a lot of testing. Like I didn't learn anything formally. And I'm still learning. Like I obviously don't know everything. So if you can see, this is one of the lettuce wraps. It's not the most beautiful because again, I'm not making this for a photo. But it is very tasty. I have some scallions from a different recipe from yesterday, so I'm just gonna add some scallion green tops on there. I think it adds a nice little oniony flavor and some sesame seeds on top. You could do black, you could do white, it's up to you. But yeah, that's the lettuce wrap. It obviously doesn't take the amount of time I took today because I've been talking and answering questions. You can also make the spicy almond sesame sauce in advance, like several days. It stays good in the fridge. Herb Jerry, why do you drink water out of a straw? Just curious. I'm very clumsy, so I figured I would spill water on myself while I was drinking water on camera and cooking at the same time. So the straw is mostly for me to be less clumsy. What else have we got here? What is your favorite vegan cookbook other than yours? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if I have one favorite. I'll name a few that I really like. Rebel Recipes cookbook. So Rebel Recipes is a British food blogger. She has an amazing vegan cookbook. It's her first one that I'm talking about because she has a second one as well. She knows flavors really well. I love it. Sweet Potato Soul has a great cookbook. I made one of her recipes from her cookbook last year on my channel. Who else? What other cookbooks do I love? Max is like, I have no idea. He's looking at me like I have no idea. Without seeing them on my shelf, it's hard for me to remember.
What about non-vegan ones?
Also Vegetable Kingdom by Bryant Terry, fabulous cookbook. He really knows how to make vegetables shine. Another great new one that's not entirely vegan, but it is vegetarian and vegan, and most recipes are vegan or can be made vegan. It's called East by Mira Soda. It's got so many fun Asian inspired recipes from all over the continent. I'm just gonna have a quick bite first. That's a really good lettuce wrap. I don't like to toot my own horn often, but a lot of good flavor in there. All right, the recipe is made, so I'll just continue answering a few more questions. I know I've already been here for an hour and a half, so thank you to everyone who has been here for this long, for taking the time out of your day to spend it with me in my kitchen. I very much appreciate it, and just thank you. I think it's time we ask Max. Evan says, I think it's time we ask Max some questions. Sure, please ask your questions for Max, and he will determine whether he wants to answer them or not.
I have to work on the video, sorry.
He says, sorry, I'm the IT guy. I don't have time. Felicia says, any side dish with your lettuce wraps for dinner? What would I serve this with? That's a good question. You could do, what would be really nice is if you did some stir-fried green beans. So like if you took some green beans and you charred them in a cast iron skillet until they were like blackened on both sides, a little bit of oil. You could finish it with some sesame seeds and scallions, some soy sauce, some sesame oil, kind of to match the flavors of this dish. I really love doing that with green beans. It takes like 10 minutes, and I think the flavors would be really nice together. Dave asks, Max, are you a paid camera guy? Sort of.
Absolutely not.
He says absolutely not. Can Max appear more on camera? I would love for Max to appear on camera more, but he's also behind the camera, so it's a little hard because if he's behind the camera, or if he's in front of the camera, then no one's behind the camera, so I don't really know what the video looks like. But I will try to get him in camera more. How much beans can Max eat in one go? Did not expect that question. Do you have an answer?
A moderate amount.
A moderate amount, okay. He's... Kyra says, hi Nisha, in terms of snacking, what would you say is your go-to snack, especially during the pandemic? I don't think I have a go-to snack. Like, I've referenced this in videos before, but I love having variety in my diet, so I almost never eat the same thing more than once. Not more than once, I shouldn't say that. I often don't eat the same thing over and over. I do really like seaweed snacks. They're not like super filling in terms of a snack, but I think they're just a really nice salty thing to have. Sumo citrus right now is in season. I think the season's ending pretty soon, but it's like my favorite citrus. It's like the huge kind of mandarin looking oranges that are really easy to peel. They're super sweet. I love those. Anything with almond butter, I love. So maybe like crackers with almond butter, an apple with almond butter. But because I'm like often in the kitchen all day long, like snacking on a recipe or tasting this, like I don't feel like I usually carve out time for snack because I'm always eating. Yes, whoever was right, as I do need a moderator. Is there a certain type of food you eat almost every day? Again, like I don't eat a lot of the same foods every day, but the thing I drink in the morning every morning without fail, is I drink an Indian spice tea. It's got cumin seeds, coriander seeds, fennel seeds, and fenugreek seeds. I just do 1 teaspoon of each, and I have it in my tea strainer, and I let it steep for like 10 minutes in boiling water. That is something I do eat without fail every day, or drink. Another thing I try to drink every day is some sort of tea with blackstrap molasses. It's a really rich source of iron. It's like a tablespoon has 20% of your daily iron needs. So I try to do that as well. Other than that, though, there's nothing I eat on like every single day.
Some questions that came up. how did we meet?
Oh, how did Max and I meet? In law school. As I mentioned, I used to be a lawyer. Our first day of law school, we went to Harvard Law School. You might have heard of it. I try not to talk about it a lot because I'm not like bragging. It's just that's where we went to school. We met on the first day of school. We were friends for the first, 6-8 months. But he secretly loved me. And then we got together at the end of our first year of law school. And we have now been together for 11 years. We celebrated 11 years about a month ago.
A lot of people are asking which other YouTubers you watch or like.
Which other YouTubers I watch? So, who do I watch? Max would know more than me because he watches a lot. Why is this so hard? I mentioned Sweet Potato Soul, Will Young, I really like his channel. From My Bowl, Sweet Simple Vegan, those are all vegan YouTubers. I really like also Radhi Delukia, she is fabulous. She does a lot vegan stuff, but also lifestyle stuff. In the non-food space, I really like Matt DeVella. He does like videos on minimalism. Obviously, I love Pickup Limes. She's a friend of mine. What else? Non-vegan as well, Pro Home Cooks. I really like his videos. I think that's about it. I'm sure I'm missing some. Yeah. Off the top of my head. I'm doing the math and you guys look way younger than your ages. Must be the food. Thank you. I'm 33. Max is 35. So do with that what you will. How do you keep cilantro fresh? Do you grow your own? The best thing I've done for cilantro to keep it fresh for a long time is when I get it from the store, I cut off just like the very bottom stems, and I wrap it in some damp paper towels and put it in a plastic bag or one of those reusable bags, and it stays a lot fresher that way than just like leaving it in the bag that you get it from the store. 11 years, dude, where's the ring? I don't talk about this a lot because I don't think it's that important, but I've never been that fussed about getting married. I feel like we already are essentially a married couple who love each other a lot and we're very happy. So if we get married at some point, that will be great, but I'm also just never been that important to me. Will you ever open a restaurant? No, I feel like it's way too much work. And like just way too much work in a way that feels very stressful. Like obviously I work a lot, but it's in the confines of my own home. I get to like be comfortable. I don't have to like, manage a huge team in a very hot kitchen. Like it's very fast paced. I would love to maybe collaborate with restaurants or do something like that or have like a custom menu somewhere that I really like. But I don't really want to open my own restaurant. So it's been quite a while. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Also, my camera is probably going to die soon because it eats a lot of battery doing this live stream thing. So I'll try to answer a couple more questions, but just wanted to reiterate thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you for being a part of the Rainbow Plant Life community. It means a lot, and my work would not be possible without you, so I appreciate it. Oh, okay. Someone asked what was the hardest thing about going vegan and like giving things up. For me, it was cheese. I think having like that, again, strong ethical reason to go vegan really helped me get over the cheese cravings. But I did live in New York City at the time, and like New York City pizza is like a cultural institution, and so that was definitely the hardest part the first few months, like going out to pizza with friends and not being able to eat it. But nowadays, a lot of restaurants will just make you a pizza without cheese, and it's usually vegan and you can add veggies, so it's definitely easier, but giving up cheese was certainly the hardest part. Is Max a lawyer still, or what does he do full time? He is not a lawyer. He stopped being a lawyer even before me. He works for a tech startup where he does a lot of different things, and he also works part-time with my business, our business, Rainbow Plant Life. Someone asked, could it work to make the lettuce wraps into summer rolls rice paper? Yeah, that definitely would be super tasty. I'm not the best at rolling rice paper and making rolls, but I think that would be really good. What's your favorite reality TV show? I don't actually watch any reality TV. Sorry, don't have an answer for you. All over the place. What are some things about you not directly related to veganism, cooking, or YouTube? So I'm a first-generation Indian American. My parents were both born in Mumbai in India. They came here to the United States after they got married in 1982. I grew up in California. I love being with my family and friends. I am very clumsy, as you might have noticed in some of my videos. I love getting sunshine, and I just try to be the best version of myself, and I try to be a compassionate person. I try to be an ethical person, and those are like really important things to me in my life. Last question.
Who does the dishes?
Who does the dishes? Great way to end it. Primarily Max, but I also do a fair amount of dishes. I also hired an assistant recently who